You've seen weird buildings before, but not like these. Tonight, we're touring the architectural ideas that were too strange to ignore. From Saudi Arabia's 170-kilometer mirror city to Tokyo's floating pyramid dreams. From a mile-high skyscraper over Chicago to a hotel that melts cars. Some of these projects bankrupted cities. Others turned into accidental ghost towns. Some were built, some failed spectacularly, and some still haunt planning offices. You'll meet architects who wanted walking cities, flying domes, and 4-kilometer mountains. By the end, you'll never look at a normal building the same way again. So let's start with the desert megacity that tried to redraw the future. NEOM's The Line, the 170-kilometer mirror desert megacity. Saudi Arabia literally started building a giant mirrored wall across the desert. They called it The Line, the flagship of the futuristic NEOM region. Announced in the early 2020s, it promised a straight city 170 kilometers long. Instead of suburbs and highways, planners stacked homes, offices, and parks vertically. The structure was supposed to rise hundreds of meters with polished mirror facades. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman personally pitched it as a new civilization model. Animations showed flying trains, layered walkways, and sunlight bouncing between endless glass cliffs. But satellite images later showed only a huge trench and scattered construction camps. As costs exploded, rumors spread that only a tiny segment might ever be finished. Frank Lloyd Wright's mile-high Illinois skyscraper over Chicago. Decades before super-tall towers, Frank Lloyd Wright casually proposed a mile-high skyscraper. In the 1950s, he unveiled the Illinois, a vertical city for Chicago's skyline. His drawings showed a needle so tall it dwarfed the Empire State Building. Wright imagined hundreds of stories of offices, apartments, and observation decks stacked upward. He even planned nuclear-powered elevators shooting people up in glass capsules. In his mind, the skyscraper would replace dozens of bulky downtown Chicago towers. Engineers, though, quietly wondered about wind sway, elevator traffic, and basic structural stability. The project never left the paper stage, but its concept still haunts architecture students. Every time someone proposes another record breaker, Wright's impossible mile-high tower resurfaces. Buckminster Fuller's plan to dome all of Midtown Manhattan. New York once seriously heard a plan to put Midtown under a glass bubble. In the 1960s, futurist Buckminster Fuller suggested a geodesic dome over Manhattan's core. His dome would stretch from river to river, covering dozens of city blocks. Inside, climate-controlled air would tame New York's brutal winters and humid summers. The idea sounded like science fiction, but Fuller sketched ventilation, structure, even maintenance. He argued snow removal costs and energy savings might eventually justify the insane construction. New Yorkers joked about living in a snow globe, but officials quietly took notes. The dome was never built, yet it became the ultimate too-big urban thought experiment. Today, when climate engineers brainstorm radical ideas, Fuller's Manhattan bubble always gets name-dropped. Tokyo Bay's proposed Shimizu megacity pyramid 2 kilometers high. Japan's Shimizu Corporation proposed turning Tokyo Bay into a colossal glass and steel pyramid. This megacity pyramid would stand around 2 kilometers tall, towering above Tokyo's skyline. Instead of one skyscraper, engineers stacked multiple pyramid layers, each the size of cities. Inside, they imagined offices, parks, apartments, and transit lines suspended in open space. The structure relied on future materials like carbon nanotubes, far stronger than normal steel. Robotic construction crews would assemble the pyramid over decades, hovering above the bay waters. Tokyo's overcrowding and land prices made the proposal feel both absurd and strangely logical. Engineers admitted it couldn't be built with current technology, yet published concept plans anyway. The pyramid remains a favorite example of Japanese megastructure dreaming, half serious, half fantasy. Exceed 4000, Japan's 4-kilometer-high artificial mountain skyscraper. If the megacity pyramid felt huge, Exceed 4000 simply broke the scale. Japanese designers imagined a man-made mountain 4 kilometers high anchored near Tokyo Bay. The project would house hundreds of thousands of residents on terraced platforms up its sides. From a distance, it looked like Mount Fuji had turned into a sci-fi city. Plans included artificial weather control, internal trains, and sunlight filtering through a transparent roof. The price tag, though, made it more of a thought experiment than a real commission. Even Shimizu engineers treated Exceed like a "what if gravity stopped caring" exercise. No client ever signed a contract, yet the renderings flooded architecture magazines. Exceed 4000 still comes up whenever someone asks, how tall could we really build? Tatlin's spiraling monument tower that tried to outdo Eiffel. After the Russian Revolution, artist Vladimir Tatlin sketched a monument meant to shame Paris. His Monument to the Third International was a twisting iron spiral taller than the Eiffel Tower. Inside the spiral, huge glass volumes would rotate at different speeds above Petrograd's river. One glass block would hold a meeting hall, another offices, another a telegraph center. The whole structure symbolized a new revolutionary Russia, literally twisting old classical forms apart. Engineers quickly pointed out that building it with post-war Soviet resources was nearly impossible. Even so, wooden models toured Europe and shocked traditional artists and politicians alike. The real tower was never started, but its jagged silhouette became an avant-garde icon. Tatlin's imaginary spiral still feels more radical than many built skyscrapers today. Stalin's Palace of the Soviets, with giant Lenin on top. Under Joseph Stalin, Moscow seriously planned a skyscraper crowned with a colossal statue of Lenin. Called the Palace of the Soviets, it was meant to replace a demolished cathedral site. Architects proposed a stacked wedding cake tower rising from a gigantic marble podium. On top, a towering Lenin would stand taller than most skyscrapers of the era. The building was supposed to host massive congress halls, museums, and government offices. Construction even started. Foundations were dug, and enormous steel columns began rising in Moscow. Then, war, shortages, and shifting priorities stopped the project before its concrete skeleton grew high. Later, the foundations were reworked into a huge open-air swimming pool. Today, the idea of a skyscraper Lenin throne feels like propaganda architecture on steroids. Le Corbusier's Plan Voisin to bulldoze central Paris for towers. Imagine looking at medieval Paris and deciding the solution was demolition and glass boxes. That was essentially Le Corbusier's Plan Voisin in the 1920s and 1930s. He wanted to bulldoze large parts of the right bank, including crowded historical districts. In their place, he drew uniform cruciform skyscrapers in perfect rows, surrounded by lawns. Roads would slice through in straight lines, turning central Paris into a car-friendly grid. To him, this was rational, hygienic, and modern. Charming old streets were chaotic slums. French officials listened, nodded politely, and then quietly refused to erase their capital's heart. But Plan Voisin still influenced post-war housing blocks and highway-loving planners worldwide. Paris survived, yet Corbusier's plan remains a warning about orderly dreams killing urban character. Walking City, the skyscraper megalopolis marching around on mechanical legs. In the 1960s, the British group Archigram asked, what if cities could walk away? Their walking city drawings showed giant robotic pods, each carrying skyscrapers on mechanical legs. Instead of streets, these mobile cities would cluster, separate, and wander like migrating animals. One day, a pod might dock at a coastline, another day alongside mountains. Inside the pods, everything looked like a high-tech cruise ship mixed with a mall. The designers weren't serious developers. They were challenging static, boring post-war concrete planning. Their walking cities influenced later movies, comics, and even video games featuring mobile fortresses. No engineer actually tried to build a building on legs that big, but Archigram proved that even sketches can jolt architecture out of its comfort zone. Cloud 9. Buckminster Fuller's floating geodesic spheres as flying cities. Buckminster Fuller didn't stop at domes. He tried to make literal floating cities. His Cloud 9 concept imagined enormous geodesic spheres, kilometers wide, filled with warm air. If heated slightly, he argued, the spheres could become neutrally buoyant in the atmosphere. People would live inside these airborne bubbles, with parks and housing wrapped around the shell. The spheres could drift slowly around Earth, tethered or guided by minimal propulsion. Fuller sketched how solar energy and lightweight structures would keep everything stable and habitable. To skeptics, it sounded like a mashup of hot air balloon and space station. No prototype ever left the ground, but the drawings spread through counterculture circles. Cloud 9 remains the purest example of architecture literally trying to leave the planet. Masdar City, the attempted zero-carbon, car-free oasis in Abu Dhabi. While some projects stayed on paper, Abu Dhabi actually started building Masdar City from scratch. Launched in the late 2000s, it promised a zero-carbon, fully car-free community. Architects from Foster & Partners laid out shaded streets, courtyards, and wind-catching towers. Instead of private cars, driverless electric pods were supposed to shuttle people underground. Solar farms and experimental technologies would power the compact desert campus near Abu Dhabi Airport. Early phases looked impressive, with narrow streets channeling breezes and high-tech research institutes opening. But the dream of a complete, self-contained green city slowly shrank with budget realities. Developers quietly allowed regular cars and postponed some of the more radical clean tech features. Masdar became a partial prototype, not the revolutionary template its marketing once promised. Auroville's golden matrimandir at the heart of a utopian township. In southern India, a spiritual community decided its town center should be a golden sphere. Auroville, founded near Pondicherry, placed the matrimandir at the middle of its master plan. From outside, the building looks like a giant golf ball made of golden discs. Inside, a silent meditation chamber holds a crystal globe lit by filtered sunlight. The surrounding land is divided into zones for culture, industry, and residential galaxies. Unlike many utopian designs, Auroville's township actually grew, though slowly and somewhat chaotically. International volunteers, Indian villagers, and long-term residents often clashed over money and governance. Yet the shimmering matrimandir still anchors the landscape like a physical symbol of intention. It shows how a single, weird building can hold together a messy human experiment. Arco Santi, Arizona's half-finished arcology experiment in the high desert. North of Phoenix, Arizona, you can visit a tiny fragment of a grand urban experiment. Italian architect Paolo Soleri called it Arco Santi, a prototype arcology, combining architecture and ecology. He started building in the 1970s with students, volunteers, and very little money. Concrete apses, vaults, and terraces cling to a desert canyon, looking vaguely Mediterranean and sci-fi. Workshops funding the project sold handmade bronze bells to visitors and supporters worldwide. The original drawings showed a dense city of thousands wrapped around the canyon walls. In reality, Only a small cluster of structures was ever completed or fully inhabited. Residents live there, hold concerts, and give tours, surrounded by half-realized construction dreams. Arco Santi became a living reminder of how hard it is to scale utopian ideas. Ordos Kangbashi, China's ghost city, built before the people came. In Inner Mongolia, China built an entire modern city and then waited for people. Ordos Kangbashi came with grand government buildings, museums, stadiums, and broad ceremonial avenues. Developers expected a booming coal economy would quickly fill the shiny new apartments. Instead, for years, drone shots showed empty plazas, silent towers, and barely used highways. A huge Genghis Khan statue overlooked neighborhoods where almost every window stayed dark at night. The Ghost City label spread across global media as a warning about overbuilt. Over time, some residents and institutions moved in, slowly softening the abandoned city image. Still, Kangbashi symbolizes what happens when planning outpaces actual demographic and economic reality. It's a reminder that you can build a city, but not force a heartbeat. California city's empty desert street grid for 1 million imaginary residents. In California's Mojave Desert, someone once drew a full city grid onto the sand. California City was planned in the 1960s as a rival to Los Angeles. Developers mapped out hundreds of streets, lakes, and neighborhoods on cheap desert land. They sold lots by mail, promising buyers a spot in a booming future metropolis. On the ground today, many streets exist only as faded dirt lines on satellite images. A much smaller real town grew near the central lake and airfield instead. The rest of the platted land became a monument to speculative suburban dreaming. Drivers who wander out there find lonely street signs standing over pure desert scrub. From space, California City still looks like a ghost blueprint for a city that never arrived. North Korea's Ryugyong Hotel, a 105-story pyramid without guests. In Pyongyang, a concrete pyramid once stood empty for years, dominating the skyline like a mirage. North Korea began the Ryugyong Hotel in the late 1980s as a prestige project. The 105-story tower was supposed to host luxury rooms, revolving restaurants, and foreign investors. But economic crisis and technical issues left the structure unfinished and windowless for a long time. Photos showed a hollow shell, cranes frozen at the top, concrete weathering in harsh winters. Later, an Egyptian telecom company helped add glass cladding and flashy LED lighting outside. Even with its new exterior, reports about the interior's readiness remained confusing and inconsistent. Tourists could see the neon triangle glowing, but almost never enter its advertised facilities. Ryugyong became the ultimate symbol of a regime's ambitions outrunning its practical capabilities. Russia's Sutyagin House, the 13-story illegal all-wood skyscraper. In the Russian city of Arkhangelsk, one businessman turned his house into a legend. Nikolai Sutyagin kept adding wooden floors to his home, ignoring normal building limits. The result was a spindly wooden tower rising more than a dozen stories high. Neighbors watched balconies, turrets, and random extensions appear, almost like a fantasy treehouse gone rogue. The structure mixed log cabin, ship mast, and fairy tale castle stacked vertically. Local authorities eventually declared it unsafe and in violation of building codes. After legal battles, demolition crews finally dismantled the towering wooden labyrinth piece by piece. Photographers rushed in before it disappeared, capturing its crooked stairways and precarious viewpoints. Sutyagin's house showed what happens when one person's architectural obsession literally outgrows the law. Brasilia, the futuristic capital city planned as a giant airplane. In mid-20th century Brazil, leaders decided to move their capital into the interior. Architect Oscar Niemeyer and planner Lucio Costa designed Brasilia from scratch on an empty plateau. From above, the city's main plan resembles an airplane or a giant bird in flight. Government ministries line one axis, while residential superblocks stretch along the sweeping wings. Niemeyer's buildings used bold concrete curves, reflecting pools, and dramatic columns everywhere. Construction pushed forward at breakneck speed, turning Cerrado scrubland into a functioning capital in years. Early residents praised the modern image, but complained about distances and car dependence. Over time, Brasilia's carefully zoned plan produced both UNESCO recognition and serious social segregation. It remains a rare case where a country actually built its futuristic capital almost exactly as drawn. Bosco Verticale, Milan's apartment towers turning into a vertical forest. In Milan, architects tried to solve urban grayness by literally growing trees on skyscrapers. The Bosco Verticale project built 2 residential towers with deep balconies for planting vegetation. Hundreds of trees and thousands of shrubs now cling to the tower's exterior surfaces. From a distance, the buildings look like high-rise forests suspended in midair. Irrigation and maintenance systems quietly keep the plants alive through hot summers and cold winters. Residents live with branches brushing their windows and birds nesting just outside. The towers became a tourist magnet and a symbol of green urban branding. They also raised questions about cost, maintenance, and whether this approach scales beyond showcase projects. Still, Bosco Verticale made the idea of vertical forests feel less like fantasy art. Habitat 67, Montreal's concrete apartment blocks stacked like Lego. For Expo 67 in Montreal, architect Moshe Safdie built a radical housing prototype by the river. Habitat 67 used prefabricated concrete modules stacked and offset like giant Lego bricks. Each apartment had its own terrace, giving tenants outdoor space even in a dense complex. From the ground, the building looks like a frozen avalanche of cubes and balconies. Safdie hoped mass production would make this modular system cheap for future cities. Instead, the prototype proved expensive and ended up as a unique, privately owned residence. Over time, its rough concrete aged into a Canadian brutalist icon many now cherish. Tours and photos show how strange yet cozy the stepped units feel inside. Habitat 67 never became a widespread template, but it permanently expanded housing design vocabulary. Nakagen Capsule Tower, Tokyo's plug-in micropods for salarymen. In 1970s Tokyo, architect Kisho Kurokawa tried to make buildings that could literally update themselves. His Nakagen Capsule Tower attached tiny prefabricated living pods to 2 concrete cores. Each capsule was a cramped studio with built-in furniture, round window, and bathroom unit. The idea was simple. Capsules could be detached and replaced as needs changed. Many owners, however, never swapped them, and the units aged badly over decades. Rust, asbestos, and leaking fixtures eventually made the futuristic tower feel oddly nostalgic and decayed. Architecture fans begged to preserve it as a symbol of Japan's metabolist movement. Despite campaigns, demolition finally started, and capsules were removed or relocated as artifacts. Nakagen showed both the excitement and the maintenance nightmare behind plug-in city fantasies. Rotterdam's cube houses, tilted yellow cubes perched on concrete stalks. In Rotterdam, a simple question led to some of Europe's strangest apartments. Architect Piet Blom asked what would happen if you tilted a regular house 45 degrees. His answer became the cube houses, bright yellow boxes balanced on concrete pylons. Inside, residents navigate sloping walls, triangular windows, and oddly angled ceiling corners. From the street, the cubes form a kind of geometric forest over a pedestrian bridge. One owner turned a unit into a museum so visitors could test their spatial perception. The project originally aimed to create a village in the city above traffic noise. Some people love the playful shapes. Others can't imagine placing furniture that way. Either way, the cube houses turned an ordinary Dutch intersection into an architectural landmark. Lucy the Elephant, a 6-story elephant you can climb inside. Long before roadside billboards dominated highways, New Jersey had a giant wooden elephant. Built in the 19th century in Margate, Lucy the Elephant advertised real estate developments. The 6-story structure let visitors climb stairs inside her legs to a viewpoint. From the howdah on Lucy's back, people could see Atlantic shorelines and dunes. Over time, she survived storms, changing owners, and even an era of neglect and decay. Locals eventually campaigned to restore Lucy, moving her slightly inland and repairing her frame. Today, tourists walk through her belly gift shop and explore the quirky interior museum. Few architecture projects combine advertising, sculpture, and tower in such a literal animal form. Lucy proves that sometimes the weirdest idea is the one everyone remembers a century later. The Longaberger Basket Building, a corporate headquarters shaped like a basket. In Ohio, a basket company decided its headquarters should look exactly like its product. The Longaberger Company built a 7-story office building shaped like a giant picnic basket. 2 massive steel handles arched over the roof, complete with mocked-up rivets. Inside, though, employees worked in fairly ordinary offices, meeting rooms, and open-plan floors. The strange exterior made the building a roadside attraction along the nearby highway. After the company's decline, the huge basket struggled to find new owners and uses. Potential buyers loved the attention, but feared the cost of adapting such a specific shape. Eventually, redevelopment plans surfaced, but the building's identity stayed tied to woven maple baskets. It remains one of the purest examples of literal product-as-building corporate architecture. Kansas City Library's parking garage disguised as giant classic book spines. In downtown Kansas City, a parking structure became one of the city's favorite photo backdrops. To hide the garage, designers turned its facade into a row of enormous book spines. Local residents voted for titles ranging from classics to science and regional history. Each book stretches several stories tall, with realistic-looking bindings and printed author names. The trick worked. People talk about the library's giant bookshelf more than the cars. Visitors often park beneath the structure and then walk over just to take pictures. The project showed how a boring infrastructure box could become public art on a budget. Instead of pretending cars don't exist, Kansas City literally wrapped them in literature. It's playful, obvious, and surprisingly effective at pulling people toward the library's front doors. Hyderabad's Fish Building, a government office that looks like a fish. In Hyderabad, India, one government agency decided to lean hard into its chosen theme. The National Fisheries Development Board built an office shaped like a giant silver fish. The building stands on stilts, with fins, eyes, and a curved tail in concrete. Windows double as scales, and a central spine runs along its back roofline. Architects clearly chose symbolism over subtlety, making the agency's purpose impossible to miss. Drivers passing on the nearby highway often slow down, wondering if it's an aquarium. Inside, though, it contains regular conference rooms, cubicles, and fluorescent-lit hallways. The fish shape sparked debate about whether such literal designs are fun or embarrassing. Either way, nobody forgets which building handles the fisheries paperwork in Hyderabad. Upside-down houses, where the roofs are on the ground. Across Europe and beyond, several tourist towns decided gravity should become a photo opportunity. Contractors built full-size houses flipped upside down, roofs resting directly on the ground. Furniture hangs from ceilings under visitors' feet, making rooms feel like frozen disasters. In Poland, Germany, and other countries, these houses attract Instagram hunters and curious families. People walk on what should be the ceiling, with stairs overhead and lamps dangling. The buildings are fully engineered, with tilted floors adding extra disorientation and mild nausea. There's no deep theory here, just a playful architectural prank turned into business. Guests leave with crooked photos and the sense their inner ear lost an argument. Upside-down houses prove you can sell tickets simply by breaking one basic expectation. Vietnam's Crazy House, a tree-like maze of surreal guest rooms. In Dalat, Vietnam, one architect turned her guest house into a living fever dream. Known as the Crazy House, it twists concrete into roots, branches, and dripping shapes. Rooms hide inside tree trunks, with winding staircases curling over roofs and courtyards. Windows come in odd shapes, and animal-themed rooms feature giant spiderwebs or kangaroos. Architect Dong Viet Nha drew inspiration from fairy tales, nature, and surrealist paintings. Locals originally saw it as bizarre, but backpackers quickly embraced its strangeness. The structure kept growing in stages, with new pathways, viewpoints, and themed bedrooms added. Visitors wander like in a maze, constantly discovering unexpected alcoves and rooftop bridges. The Crazy House shows how one person's private fantasy can become a national tourist landmark. Krivy Domek, Poland's crooked shopping mall that looks photoshopped. On a busy street in Sopot, Poland, stands a building that looks digitally melted. Krivy Domek, or the Crooked House, bends walls and windows into cartoonish curves. Its facade warps, like someone dragged architecture with a computer liquefy tool. Inside, though, it functions as a fairly normal shopping mall and office space. Designers based the look on illustrations from Polish and Swedish fairy tale books. Tourists often stop in confusion, checking if their camera lenses are actually broken. At night, lights enhance the wavy lines, turning the building into a glowing caricature. Locals have mixed feelings, but it undeniably puts Sopot on many architecture curiosity lists. The Crooked House proves that even commercial real estate can have a sense of humor. The Big Duck, Long Island's roadside poultry shop shaped like a duck. On Long Island, New York, one farmer turned his chicken shop into pure roadside theater. He built a drive-up store shaped exactly like a white duck with yellow beak. Customers once bought eggs and poultry by walking into the duck's hollow body. Headlights from passing cars reflected off its painted eyes along the rural highway. The building became so locally famous that architects coined duck architecture for literal shapes. Eventually, the original poultry business closed, but preservationists saved the building itself. The Big Duck moved slightly and now houses a tiny museum and gift shop. Drivers still detour to see it, proving simple visual jokes can become historic landmarks. All from one stubborn idea: if you sell ducks, build a duck. Moscow's circular apartment blocks built as massive concrete rings. In Soviet-era Moscow, planners experimented with ring-shaped apartment complexes around courtyards. One of the most famous stands in the district of Orekhovo-Borisovo. From above, it forms a near-perfect concrete circle enclosing trees, playgrounds, and paths. Apartments line the ring, giving many residents views into the shared interior yard. The design aimed to create strong neighborhood identity while efficiently packing in people. In practice, some residents loved the enclosed community feeling. Others felt strangely walled off. The circular form makes navigation tricky. Newcomers sometimes get disoriented along repeating corridors. Architecturally, the rings stand out against Moscow's usual rows of panel apartment blocks. They show how even a centralized system occasionally allowed wild geometry in everyday housing. Tashkent's State Circus, a flying saucer dome for Soviet acrobats. In Tashkent, Uzbekistan, the State Circus performs under what looks like a landed spaceship. The circular building's low dome and ribbed exterior scream retro science fiction aesthetics. Inside, a traditional circus ring hosts acrobats, clowns, and animal acts for families. The contrast between futuristic shell and old-fashioned performances is part of the charm. The structure was built during the Soviet period, alongside similar circuses in other republics. Architects wanted circuses to feel like modern, permanent institutions, not temporary traveling tents. Earthquakes and time threatened some of these domes, but Tashkent's remained a cultural landmark. Children growing up there often remember their first circus visit as almost alien contact. The building proves that architectural weirdness sometimes hides very traditional entertainment inside. Uzbekistan's giant solar furnace that looks like a supervillain's death ray. In the mountains near Parkent, Uzbekistan, stands a structure straight from a comic book lair. A huge concave mirror array focuses sunlight onto a tower-mounted receiving platform. The facility is actually a solar furnace used for high-temperature material experiments. From a distance, the mirrored field and tower resemble a focused energy weapon. Soviet engineers built it to test ceramics, metals, and other heat-resistant materials. The site includes control rooms, laboratories, and support buildings now aging in the sun. Visitors sometimes compare it to scenes from spy movies and superhero films. Despite appearances, it's more research laboratory than villain hideout, though tours are infrequent. The Parkent solar furnace shows how serious science can accidentally invent perfect movie backdrops. London's walkie-talkie skyscraper that accidentally melted cars below. In central London, a curvy skyscraper once turned a street into a surprise solar oven. Officially named 20 Fenchurch Street, its profile earned the nickname walkie-talkie from locals. Its concave glass facade focused sunlight onto the pavement and buildings across the road. For a few weeks, parked cars literally had plastic parts warped by the concentrated heat. One journalist famously fried an egg on a patch of superheated stone. Developers rushed to install external shading fins to break up the reflected rays. The episode sparked debates about computer simulations and testing glare long before construction finishes. Londoners joked the building looked goofy and came with a built-in death ray. It's now mostly remembered for its rooftop garden views and that brief architectural oops moment. Vienna's Hundertwasser House, apartments with trees growing out of windows. In Vienna, artist Friedensreich Hundertwasser turned a social housing block into a living painting. Hundertwasser House features uneven floors, wavy walls, and bright patchwork colors covering the facade. Trees literally grow from balconies and window boxes, their roots integrated into the structure. The artist despised straight lines, insisting nature prefers curves, bumps, and irregularity everywhere. Inside, residents live in relatively normal apartments tucked behind the playful exterior skin. The building quickly became a tourist magnet, with crowds spilling into the small surrounding square. City officials built a separate shopping arcade nearby to absorb some of the attention. Hundertwasser's approach inspired later eco-architects who combined greenery with strong artistic statements. The project is proof that public housing does not have to look anonymous or dull. Casa Batlló, Gaudi's Barcelona townhouse that looks like a dragon. On Barcelona's Passeig de Gràcia, one building seems halfway transformed into a creature. Casa Batlló, redesigned by Antoni Gaudi, ripples with organic balconies and mosaic-covered surfaces. Its roofline resembles a dragon's spine, with colored tiles shimmering like scales. Inside, Gaudí shaped stair rails, windows, and light wells to feel fluid and underwater. The central atrium fades from deep blues to pale whites as you look up. Originally a family home, it later opened as a museum and cultural venue. Millions of visitors now wander through, noticing details like bone-shaped columns and swirling ceilings. At night, exterior lighting turns the facade into a living, breathing storybook illustration. Casa Batlló shows how far one architect could push a simple urban renovation. La Sagrada Familia, the forever unfinished spiky stone cathedral of Barcelona. Also in Barcelona, Gaudí left behind a cathedral that turned construction site into a permanent state. La Sagrada Familia started in the late 19th century and still isn't fully finished today. Its facades explode with carved saints, plants, animals, and dense symbolic details. Inside, forest-like columns branch toward a ceiling patterned with geometric light wells. Different architects continued Gaudí's vision after his death, interpreting old models and sketches. Cranes, scaffolding, and closed chapels became part of the normal visitor experience for decades. Deadlines for completion keep moving, with wars, funding issues, and design debates slowing progress. Despite that, the basilica already dominates Barcelona's skyline with towering, colorful spires. Few buildings demonstrate obsessive perseverance like a church still rising after more than a century. China's Tianzi Hotel shaped like three colossal bearded god statues. In Hubei province, travelers can stay inside three enormous figures from Chinese folk tradition. The Tianzi Hotel's facade depicts the gods of fortune, prosperity, and longevity as giant statues. Rooms are hidden within their robes, sleeves, and the decorative elements around them. One famous suite is reportedly located inside the central figure's enlarged head. From the highway, the building looks more like a theme park gate than lodging. Chinese officials once criticized the design as an example of excessive novelty architecture. Tourists, however, flocked there precisely because it seemed so unapologetically kitschy. Photos of the three multicolored giants circulated online, turning the hotel into a meme. It's a reminder that architectural taste can clash hard with viral popularity. Delhi's Lotus Temple, a giant marble flower for worship. On the outskirts of New Delhi, a white marble lotus rises from carefully landscaped pools. The Lotus Temple serves as a Baha'i house of worship open to all faiths. Architect Fariborz Saba based its form on 27 overlapping petals in 3 layers. Inside, the main hall is simple, with benches and filtered daylight from above. No sermons or statues dominate, just quiet space for prayer and contemplation. The building's symmetry and water gardens quickly made it a landmark of modern Indian architecture. From the air, its petal pattern stands out against the dense surrounding neighborhoods. Millions of visitors enter each year, many more than most conventional temples nearby. The Lotus Temple shows how a single strong metaphor, like a flower, can unite engineering and spirituality.